Broadway star and Grammy nominee Aaron Lazar, welcome to Cultural Attaché.
It's great to see you, Craig. Thanks.
So we're going to go back in time a bit before we start talking about the album. When you played the role of Shriner in the Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera production of Bye Bye Birdie, did the
Reiner,
yeah
unbelievable.
did the career you wanted and the one you've accomplished seem to be an impossible dream for your 23-year-old self?
Uh, you know, I'm gonna remember Bye Bye Birdie for the role of Mr. Johnson, um, somebody's dad, one of the kids' dads. I had a very small feature. I remember the Shriners hats. I have no idea what I did in one of those. So I remember Rue McClanahan. I remember my roommate Barrett Foa because we were getting our equity cards together at the time, and he's been a buddy ever since. We're going like 25 years now, and yeah, I mean it it was all just a dream, right? It was all don't you believe in yourself, you go for it. It's like my kid who wants to be in the NBA. I wanted to be a Broadway star. I mean, we all have impossible dreams. Um, and I just think it's interesting as we get older and we become, much more rational, sensible, logical, practical adults. All of a sudden, our impossible dreams are out of reach. It's like, why? Um, so somehow I've been dreaming up pretty big dreams and making them come true. Um, and it's a way more fun way to live life than I'd been living it for at least the last decade. So it's good to reconnect with you.
Well, possibility is better than the assumption that there are no possibilities, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, you get, when a doctor gives you their opinion on a diagnosis, which is a first opinion, because then you go get a second opinion, and they tell you that there's no possibilities. Um, I'm like, sorry, man, that's just not the way I see life. So I'm gonna figure out and find my way to possibilities, and it's been the journey of a lifetime. Just in a couple of years, I feel like I've lived many lives, but I've found my life to be infinitely, in so many ways, infinitely more possible than it's ever been.
Well, your album, which by the way, I purchased the vinyl version. No streaming for me here. I wanted
Thank you.
vinyl.
How's the vinyl sound? Because I don't have the vinyl. I don't have a
It
record
sounds
player.
great. It sounds great. In fact, I brought it to Mexico to the house that we have there.
Oh,
And
that's
that
cool.
that was the since moving all of our stuff down there, that was the first album I played.
That's awesome, man. I'm honored.
Yeah, and so was I because I think it's a terrific album. But you've mentioned before in interviews for this album how important performing The Impossible Dream was for you. For those who don't know, it's from the musical The Man of La Mancha. But you had an important story about when you performed it at the University of Cincinnati College's Conservatory of Music. So I don't want to rehash that, but I want to know how your relationship with the song has evolved in the 24 years since that particular experience.
Yeah, well, I was a grad student at CCM, and I was playing Don Quixote in that musical and sang that song. And the funniest thing about that is we did a dress rehearsal, and I think there was like a janitor in the back, and I'm all dressed up, and CCM, amazing production value, sets, costumes, critics and agents from New York, the whole deal. Uh, but at the dress rehearsal, there's nobody there, so I do the Impossible Dream. And the janitor just keeps mopping in the back, like doesn't stop, like nothing. And I get really like freaked out. I'm 20, I guess 24 years old or whatever. And I call the head of the program down to the stage, who was directing the show, Aubrey Berg. And I'm like, Aubrey, the number doesn't work. I think we need to cut it. He's like, you want to cut the Impossible Dream? I was like, yes. He said, no, you're an idiot. And he just walked away. And of course, it stopped the show. I say it. I stopped the show that night for like, I think it was 2 minutes straight of a standing ovation that blew me away. And I was standing there on stage crying because I just thought, this is what I'm meant to do. Like this is as good as it gets, and my impossible dream of becoming a professional actor is coming true. And then I didn't sing that song, didn't touch it. Wanted to audition for the Broadway revival that Brian Stokes Mitchell got. I was just too young, you know. And so I literally didn't sing it again until I was in New York. It's almost 2 years ago now, and obviously going through a lot and singing and doing concerts. And the conductor of the American Pops I was working with at the time was like, "Do you know the Impossible Dream? We should put it into the show." And I was like, "I do. I haven't sang it in 20 years, but sure." And we did it. And that night, I just kind of had that, epiphanal moment of like, oh, wow, this song is kind of the story of my life right now. And so another year went by before we started making an album. And I had been traveling the country, not just singing The Impossible Dream wherever I could, but I created a sort of motivational speaking platform and called it The Impossible Dream and talked about the full circle nature of like being a kid and having an impossible dream and living it. And then, having a new impossible dream to beat ALS, which became an awakening and, a dream to heal all of me. And it all came through that song, man. So when Jonathan and Kit were like, "You want to make an album?" I was like, "Yeah, it's going to be called Impossible Dream because everyone has one, and we should do the bunch of duets, but I'll do that as a solo, and we'll come up with like a new arrangement for me because I had been singing Josh Groban's incredible arrangement." So Charlie Rosen did an unbelievable arrangement of the song, and I get in the studio and I start recording it, and I'm like, I'm bored with myself. Like, this is not about me, really. Like, it's not a vanity project. This album is bigger than me. It's about hope and inspiration and healing. And I was like, we've got all these incredible artists singing duets. Why don't we do a We Are the World style Impossible Dream? Is that possible? And literally, like, me and my producers are in my car, like sketching out on the sheet music where we can break up a solo vocal line into like we thought we'll get 10 people to sing on it. And ultimately, there's like 50 like 50 people. I mean, it was one of those things where you start walking the path and the path becomes clear before you. And I'm so grateful to, not just the producers and the artists, all of the artists, both, in front of the camera, so to speak, and behind, but all of the sort of cosmic forces that came together to make this happen.
Did you ever envision that you would become Quincy Jones?
Um, you know, no is the short answer. I've always had big ideas, like really big ideas, and I always feel like they're possible. And that's just how I'm built. So with this, it was just like, well, why don't we do it? And thankfully, I built a career over decades in New York, in LA, or whatever that, I can pick up the phone and call some pretty special people. And these people are special not just because of, their artistry, but because of their hearts and souls. And everybody said yes, man. I mean, everybody said yes. Um, and then we were like, okay, now you got to produce it. Like you got to, so I don't take the credit. I don't know, enough about Quincy as far as, his actual producing of things, but I give most of the physical production credit, the studios, the scheduling, all the line producing goes to Jonathan Estabrooks and Kit Wakely. It was a real team effort to make this happen. But it was also like old home week, man. I mean, you know, there's something about, as you know, because you've been covering this for a long time, there's just a very special community. And that comes from, getting thrown into a room with your heroes and your idols and then kids who are in their first Broadway show, and everything in between. and you're given a piece and you've got, a month to 2 months to put it together, and you're in the trenches 8 shows a week, 6 days a week or whatever, and so like you get close to people quick. Um, and that is, that never leaves. So whether you haven't done a Broadway show in, a year or 10 years, there's just something about it that everybody getting together to get in the studio that day, we were all like, why don't we do this more often? And it was really special.
Well, I like what you told the Arizona Daily Star about the album last fall. You said, quote, "It felt like a bunch of friends getting together to do what we do, which is pour our hearts and passion into things and take risks." And that sounds like exactly what you've described, but I think there's this wonderful thing that that most people don't get to experience is the kind of love and support that you've been shown vis-a-vis, public statements or participation in this album is the kind of thing that mostly happens when we're already gone. And, you know, you
What a
have
waste.
you have this great you get to be here for all of this. So I'm wondering what it meant to you personally to have all these people who can pour their hearts and passion into something do that because you asked them, because of your impossible dream.
That is the nail on the head question, and I thank you for asking it. I mean, it means everything because a doctor tells you you have ALS. What's your life like? And I was like, I'm gonna figure out a way. And as I created this thing, to have the love and support. First of all, I didn't speak about it publicly for a year and a half. It's only been a year actually since I spoke about it publicly. And in that year, I mean, I have learned, let's put it this way, over the almost 4 years that I've been living with it, I've learned a lot about life. And I've learned that, we create our lives. And that if you think your life's going to change and then you'll change, you got it backwards. It's when you change, your life will change. And I took it upon myself to say, hey, to heal my body, I've got to figure out a way to heal the rest of me, my mind, my soul, my emotions. And in doing that, I've changed. I'm a different person. And my life changing dramatically over the last year is a reflection of that, right? As within, so without. So I am everyone showing up from, friends to complete strangers. People that might be listening to this now that are just offering their love and support. When I started to speak about it, I knew one thing. I knew that we have to change the conversation. You have to change the conversation from, oh, victim, victim. Sorry, my cuckoo clock is going off. And is it 1 o'clock? So it
Just
should only
about.
clock once,
You're-
but it's
yeah, it's
it's
just about one
it's
o'clock. Your cuckoo clock is a little bit early.
he's early.
Yeah, it's a little bit early. I show 12:58 and some seconds left.
Oh man, I gotta adjust him. He's got a silly music function on now that we're waiting for. I don't know if you can hear it. I'll keep going.
Yeah.
It's fun. I was like in Switzerland with my dad. I got to bring something back for my kids. And there were these cuckoo clocks. I'd never seen an actual one. And the little bird comes out super cute. Anyway, it means everything because I created all of this as a way to help myself heal and to inspire other people to tap into that power we all have within us to make the impossible possible. It's the divinity in us, man. We are made in God's image. It is the universe. It is source energy. It is all of that. It is the body can heal from anything. It is all of that. And so, I can't thank everyone enough. I truly can't, because this thing is the hardest thing I've ever living with it, fighting, beating it, healing. It is the greatest adversity I've ever faced. And to have all of this love and support surrounding me all the time is proof that the universe is in support of my dream. And I really am sharing that not just because I'm in awe and blown away by that, but for anyone out there who's like, I don't know if I can do it, and I also I fully appreciate that I have an extraordinary network of people, right? From family and friends to, you know, strangers just because of, the people know me from some of my work. But even if you don't think you have that, you have way more than you may even realize. The love in your life shows up when you take a risk to love yourself enough to ask for help and to put yourself out there. And these are all things that, like, I'm so grateful to have learned to pass on to my kids, and I use them every day, every day.
Given the physical challenges that ALS, you know, forces on somebody, has it impacted the way you sing? Have you had to learn new ways of singing?
Yeah, well, I'm seated a lot, right? And so I was like, oh, am I going to be able to sing sitting down all the time? Because I had never really liked doing that. But I got good at that. Yeah, now it's like, the diaphragm muscles, the strength of the diaphragm and the abs to sustain things and use musculature in a way that connects, the airways to the vocal cords. It's different. But I can still sing, man, and sing pretty good. So I'm incredibly grateful that I'm able to share all this message with my voice, and I'm gonna keep doing that. And yeah, I mean, the fact that the Grammys recognize me in this album, um, again, just I'm so honored because it speaks to the power of what I'm trying to say through this music.
Well, since you brought up the Grammys, it was going to be something I was going to ask you a little bit later, but obviously this is an important, recognition of the work that you've done. But I'm just wondering, what would, how do you perceive that opportunity should you win the Grammy? How do you perceive that opportunity to spread this message, that you have with the album in the form of an acceptance speech?
Yeah, you're asking such great questions, Craig, because I'm the guy who sits there watching these award shows, and I'm so excited when somebody wins because I just want to hear they've got they've got 1 minute to say something to the world, and I don't take that lightly at all. I really don't. Like it's not about to me rattling off a list of people's names. As many people as I have to thank, I couldn't fit them in 1 minute anyway. There are, my parents and, my producing partners on this album, but there are so many people to thank, but it's more about taking 1 minute to say thank you for listening to this music because here's the message behind it, and hopefully inspiring people with that message of hope and resilience in the face of adversity and the healing power of music and the healing power of community. Um, and so, I I'm honored to have to even be nominated in a category that has been won by, my heroes, Sinatra and Tony Bennett and Barbra Streisand and Bublé and Harry Connick. I mean, come on. Like, I mean, that's who I grew up listening to, right? So I'm in, hallowed air. Um, but yeah, I hope I get a chance to speak for a minute, and just inspire more people.
Well, I think anybody who listens to the album is going to be moved in particular by one track, and that depends on how well they know your collaborators. But I Am Loved reduced me to tears almost the second it started. How
Oh,
did
really?
Yes, because it's Rebecca Luker, who of course passed away, what were 4+ years ago at this point. And I'm just wondering, how did that, I mean, I know technologically how that collaboration came to be, but how did the reality of it come to be? How did you come up with the idea or get, I assume, Danny Burston involved to make sure that it was okay to happen?
Yeah, so I was when we were putting the song list together, I had a bunch of ideas, but I was like, there's so many amazing artists on this album. I want to talk to somebody who knows their voices and knows how to like really help me hone in on songs that, because I would ask, let's say you go to Neil Patrick Harris, and you say, would you sing a tune with me on this album? And he says, yes. Well, it's like, well, now what tune do you go back to Neil with to, get him excited? And so I recruited Seth Rudetsky, who's, a longtime old friend and musical genius, and has worked with all these people. And if he hasn't, he knows them back. And we would sit down and, just throw around hundreds of songs. But Seth said, have you thought of Rebecca for this album? And I probably, started to cry myself and was like, that's a brilliant idea. So then I just called Danny, um, who I don't know well, but is, such a great guy. And he gave me his blessing. And so then it was like, well, what Rebecca Luker song do we want to do? And I just listened to as much of her stuff as I could. And I was like, I want to capture love and on this album somehow. I really just want to capture love because that's the whole point, is that it's not about some, weepy power ballad, uh that, none of this album was about like getting overly dramatic about life. It was about celebrating life and celebrating hope and celebrating inspiration, celebrating love. So I really wanted to sing with Rebecca about love, and that song to me was one of the best ones. It became a hard one to do because, first of all, Brent's vocal is flawless on it. I mean, the two of them sound flawless. I mean, it's a pretty flawless track for when it was made in the 90s. Like, it's just perfect. So I wanted to do something better than that. And we actually spent a lot of time, and recruiting, an amazing arranger, Larry Blank, to, rework the brass, um, was really important, just to try and update the sound, modernize it a little bit. And then getting to sing with Rebecca was just like old times, man. I mean, it's like she was there,
Yeah.
because I wasn't in the room with all the artists. Maybe half of us got to be in the studio together. The rest of us were recording on separate coasts. So it was just like recording with Rebecca, as if she was in New York and I was in LA.
Well, if anybody wants to get a sense of what the process was like, all they have to do is watch the video for Impossible Dream, and you get to see people
Right.
in various studios and, get an idea of how this all came to be, which is inevitable because you're getting that many people into the one room at the same time. Really only happens if you're Quincy Jones.
Apparently, I'm in even more rarefied air now. So I love the double Quincy reference. Yeah, I mean, I had made an album during the pandemic. My kids were really scared. Having trouble going to bed at night. They were like, I guess 7 and 9 at the time, or 8 and 10, something like that. And I would sing to them "Till There Was You" from the Music Man as a lullaby. And then I went, ding, what, there's got to be Broadway parents singing lullaby Broadway songs to their kids. So why don't we make an album called Broadway Lullabies? And I'll ask friends who are Broadway stars who have kids to sing their favorite song but that album was completely made, through the mail, because it was a pandemic. So we just mailed a microphone, so that everyone was on the same mic. We mailed a microphone around to every artist, and, they would email in their vocals and upload files. And, we mixed I'm really proud of it, a pretty beautiful little album to soothe families, that nobody knows about because, I didn't make any money on it or spend any money on marketing or anything. It was really just to make some music at a tough time for everybody. And I guess that, teed me up for a little bit of what it was going to be like to make this album. Although, we had obviously a much bigger budget, and we're able to get more people in the room, which was great.
And press vinyl as well,
Press vinyl.
which I think is essential at this point.
I gotta get
Um,
me a record player, dude.
you do. Um, so our conversation was originally set up because you were going to be performing the role of Benjamin Stone in concert performances of Stephen Sondheim's musical Follies that Pasadena Playhouse was producing, and the fires got in the way. And I'm hoping at some point this will get rescheduled because
Yeah, we all are.
I
Yeah.
would love to see you sing, the role of Benjamin Stone. But I'm wondering, what were you looking forward to most about bringing your version of Benjamin Stone to life?
Oh man. Well, first of all, I mean, George Hearn is like a hero, right? So I would do shows to meet my heroes.
Right.
So, talking about Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera, like I got to meet Ed Linde. I was just the biggest Sweeney Todd nerd, like, original Broadway company and then touring company with Angela Lansbury and George Hearn. Ed Lindeck played the judge. So Ed was Grand Hotel that summer, and I would take Ed to Wendy's and just hear stories about Ed's career as we shared like a Frosty. And I was like 24, and I'm like, my life it can't get any better. And then, I met Angela, and then it was like there was a reading of The Visit, and George was going to be in it. And, it was Anne Reinking directing it or something. And I was like, just get me in it. I don't care what I do in it. I have to meet. And I told George the story of like, listening to him, watching him on VHS play Sweeney, and it's the greatest. I still think it's top three leading man performances in the history of Broadway. And he cried and gave me a hug, and it was like, I'll never forget that. You know what I mean? So I've been listening to George on the recording of one of the anniversary cast albums. Um, so he's a hero. I mean, Sondheim's tricky. He's complicated. It's adult stuff. It's like I sang Being Alive at Segerstrom a year ago in a concert with Betty Buckley, and I think I finally understood what that song meant. And the first time I sang Being Alive was in a workshop of Sondheim on Sondheim. It became I Sondheim or something on Broadway, directed by James Lapine. And I literally sang Being Alive as like I was probably 30 years old or something, maybe like 31. And Stephen Sondheim was sitting in a folding chair 1 foot away from me, right?
That's
And
not
I was like,
intimidating at all, right?
not intimidating at all. And I had no idea what that song was about. And you can sing it well, but to really get it. And it took another 15 years, right? So with Follies, just an opportunity to like play an adult in a Sondheim show. These adults are in these complicated relationships, these failed marriages, and complex friendships, and like really bring a guy to life who is learning that he's gone through most of his life without loving himself. And I had that realization, you know, over the last couple of years as I realized, oh, I to heal, I need to turn this back on in a way that I had turned off from personal and professional trauma. It was like, oh, so I was looking forward to exploring that, and also working with that incredible cast and Lee, the director, and actually at Pasadena Playhouse itself, which is in my backyard, but I've never gotten a chance to work there. So hopefully they'll find a way to keep it alive.
I certainly hope they do. I was looking forward to you singing The Road You Didn't Take, because I love this idea of a man who is sort of confronting what his life is at a time when he's not necessarily thinking this is what he's going to be doing. And I particularly the last line, the Ben I'll never be who remembers him. And I'm wondering, how does that song resonate with you, with everything that you're going through? And what do you think we as an audience are missing by not getting to see you express that through that song?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, those are questions that I was sort of just starting to ask myself as I was starting to work on the material in preparing to go into rehearsal. Um, Look, in the show, and again, there are Follies fans out there that are gonna probably beat me up over that. I don't know the show as well as I do most of Sondheim shows. That was another reason I was looking forward to doing it. But my understanding of it is you got a guy who's singing a song basically saying it's fine. Like you don't you chose the road that you're on. and life's great, so don't worry about it. You don't need to look back. But the irony is as he's saying that, he's realizing, oh, I'm looking back, and as I look back, I'm having feelings that like maybe I chose wrong. And I think that's a pretty terrifying feeling to confront in the moment in front of an audience, is a guy having a realization that like you think this guy has everything. He's got power, he's got money, he's got, a beautiful wife, he's got, way too many women, he's got influence, and yet he's looking at his life and he's like, I'm a failure. This is worthless. And I understand that on a deeply, deeply personal level. I understand what it's like to blame yourself, to lose the Ben I'll never be, to lose connection with that part of yourself, so much so that you lose belief in yourself. Um, there are enough similarities there between what I've gone through and what, there's obviously differences, but I was really looking forward to talking to Lee about all of that and exploring that. So I don't have really the full answer, but it is something I think that again ties into what we've been talking about this whole interview, which is your shot at your dreams is not over. And unfortunately for Ben, he thinks in that moment that it is, and he starts to have a panic attack.
Well, then he has
Like
a full
by
on
the end of the show, he's
he
his
has full on breakdown. He has a full on breakdown.
right. So by the end, he's the entire identity that he's created, that he thought was who he was, is just crumbling, right? And then there's the tragedy of it all, which they seem to just kind of not, they seem to not actually change. Like that's the actual tragedy. Is like it's not like he runs off with Sally at the end. Um, they all kind of seem to go back to the roads that they've taken, and you're like, oh, it's so Sondheim. It's so tragic.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, that show.
Yeah.
It's truly heartbreaking. Well, you are not a person who doesn't evolve and change. I mean, you are quoted as having said, "I'm trying to go with the flow, which is not what I'm used to." I used to try to micromanage my career choices. Now, as John Lennon said, and I made a reference before we started that there would be a quote I would bring up. John Lennon famously wrote, "Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans." Given the positivity that you present and the way you've spoken about dealing with your own ALS journey, I suppose you're looking forward to what happens next when you become the next person to reverse ALS.
Yes, sir.
And
I mean,
what
it's,
are you looking forward to when you become the next person to reverse ALS?
I mean, on a very simple level, I'm looking forward to doing all the things that most people do in life that we take for granted. Just brushing my teeth without having to think about it, or not spending most of the day in a chair. Um, I'm looking forward to going on walks and buying a dog and, getting back into physically participating in life again without being in, um, incredible discomfort and having to live with and navigate tremendous doubt and worry and fear. It's a lot. It's a lot. But the work to get there has taught me how to get there. You're learning how to deal with the mind, learning resilience, learning some of these, I call them secrets of life, right? That we create our lives. We choose what we want to experience, and either consciously or unconsciously, we create our lives. So getting much more conscious about the life that I want to create, and practicing that, rehearsing that. I like to say, like, it's a good thing I'm an actor because I love to rehearse. You're gonna live the life you rehearse, right? What life are you rehearsing? And I'm rehearsing the one where this is gone in whatever way I can. And so that's on a small level, on a big level, like I'm looking forward to sharing this message with as many people as I can. Right now, I travel the country and I speak, and it's hard. Travel is hard. So I can't do as much of that as I would like. Um, and I can't wait until I can because I'm going to be helping as many people as I can. And hopefully, this is the beginning of that.
And maybe there will be a production of Sweeney Todd in your future, which would be
Or
everything, right?
first of all, yes, please, but Man of La Mancha would be better.
Okay, well, you didn't try to steal a three sheet of Man of La Mancha out of someone's office,
Where
if
did
I
you hear
remember
that?
correctly. You told me that when we spoke in 2017.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've been dreaming up the shows, that I want to do. And of course I'm like, we got to do Sweeney. But then, I saw Sweeney, I saw Josh and Anna Lee and incredible cast and it was so great. And I was like, okay, I know what Sweeney is. He's so angry and he's so like that's not the first show I want to do. I really want to. Man of La Mancha is, from what I remember, it's a show about a guy who, you know, there's a scene I'll never forget. I have some photos from it, and it's this guy is such a dreamer, and he's an unwavering idealist, and to give that hope to people, the power of love and the power of the imagination, and like I'm ready for that.
Great. Well, I have one last question for you, Aaron. When we spoke in September of 2017, which is before you were doing your one-man show at Rockwell Table and Stage, I asked you to compare the discipline of putting together a performance in a Broadway musical or a cabaret show to the preparation you did in track and field. Because you used to throw javelin and throw the discus as well. And you said, I settled on the throwing events because they were these very individual pursuits. It's you against yourself. And I think a career as an artist is a lot the same thing. I think your album Impossible Dream points out that being an artist is not just an individual pursuit, that there are always countless people behind you and supporting you. So, how do you think your perspective of what it is to be an artist has changed in the 7.5 years since we last spoke?
Brilliant question, man. And you couldn't. I'm not going to be able to say it much better. I think you just said it. I think we're saying it, throughout our conversation. It I really did used to think nobody was going to help me, and I think I took on, my family. There's the practical realities. Nobody in my family's in the business, and I didn't really have like a mentor. I had great teachers, but nobody really, I was banging my head on every rung of the ladder on my climb to the top, so to speak. And in doing so, I got really protective of myself. And I got screwed over by this manager and sued by that person for nothing and, betrayed by this. And it was so exhausting. I couldn't believe how hard it was. And I just thought, I got this. I don't need anybody. I'm going to prove and prove. And I hardened myself, so to speak, to the industry. And then the same thing happened to me personally through a divorce. So over the last couple of years, I've really learned that it's actually the opposite. And it goes back to the heart thing, right? Like this is our connection to the world. I really think sometimes life is as simple as just a universal, like constant exchange of love with others. And when you turn that off, because you're like, I don't need anybody else, I got this. You are unaware that you are actually cutting off your connection to God and the divine, and you are making a mountain where there might be a molehill so that you can give yourself the victory of climbing it. And this opportunity for me has been completely life-changing because I've had to accept help. I've had to ask for help. I've had to humble myself, to accepting help. I've had to deal with a lot of humbling and uh, it's opened my eyes to how life really can be if you choose it, which is open this up, love yourself as much as possible, and you will then be able to receive all the love in your life. And as an artist, yeah, I think I I'm so glad that I've now found that. It makes me look so much more forward to collaboration, to just making stuff, to knowing that everybody's going through some kind of adversity in some way. And it's just a much more, the humanity of it all is so much deeper and so much more empathetic. Um, and I guess that's just part of getting old too, man.
or growing up.
Yeah,
And it's not getting old, it's getting older.
getting older. That's right.
Yeah, because we're not old yet.
No, we're not. We're
Yeah,
not.
absolutely. But if we keep waiting 7.5 years between interviews, we will be very old.
I know. Well, I'm really glad that I got to talk to you, Craig, because it's been too long, and I was happy to go back and read the piece that you did all those years ago, and
Oh,
you
thank you.
just you ask amazing questions, man, and I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. And I appreciate the album and good luck at the Grammys. I'll be rooting for you for sure.
Thank you so much, man.
All
Thank
right.